As Justin said, we love the smell of fresh Bitcoin in the morning. Indeed, we do. We love sunrises. We check. The sun is up. Coincidentally, Bitcoin is also running. So we can have our coffee and talk about the news. 1 second. I hit my coffee behind my computer. Tastes like fresh Bitcoin. Whatever that might taste like. We don't know, right? So, we're getting heavy doses of fake news, right? And this show is all about protecting you from fake news, right? We like to protect you from the stress of fake news. We like to talk about the psyops that are going on all the time. And here's an amazing one. I mean, it's almost too much. So we talk a lot about the, let's say, low IQ or inability to grasp the world around them that most mainstream journalists have, but this is just the next level, right? So from a Bitcoiner's point of view, this is hard to really even fathom because we live in this climate. We use words every day like inflation, right? And here's Reid, right? Now imagine your name is Reid, Joy Reid. And this is what you're going with, right? This is her complaint as the elections are coming up. Republicans taught people the word inflation. Most people have never used the word in their lives. That's what they're going with now in the mainstream news. So if we were to just measure the slaughterability of this whole system, right? They're trying to, I don't know if it's gaslighting, but they're trying to say that people have never used the word inflation and that it's like this not useful word and that, oh, it's because of political messaging, right? It's because of political messaging, which is great because you really see the talent level left in the Democrat Party. I mean, in general, we've seen a steep decline in the IQ level and capacity of people who've joined government and political politics over a generation now, right? We often say that the Second World War was the period in history that configured modern government, right? Like the government that we know how it works kind of settled into place or was pushed into place to win World War II, right? And it did its job. And at the time, the best and brightest went there, right? The best and the brightest. And, you know, as an extension, that's what we talk about in Bitcoin all the time. It's where the best and brightest are going because over time, the World War II win, right? The World War II win. And at the time, these institutions, all of that were respected and there was a lot of competition to do these jobs. You know, what Joy Reid was doing, right? Like commenting from the front, there was definitely military involvement and government involvement in how the media covered World War II, and we're going to get to that in today's show. But nevertheless, they were high IQ individuals who were able to make choices, and they would have never gone with this, oh, who invented the word that's causing us so much trouble? Not only would they not have gone that, they wouldn't have taken the Democrat approach right now, which is to take this like idea of losing democracy, like it's kind of difficult to put your finger on, right? Because you could say that to many Republicans and they'd say, we've already lost it. You can say to Bitcoiners, right, we need to protect democracy, and the Bitcoiners will get sort of like, what are you talking about? It's gone. We don't have that, right? That whatever that was, we didn't get it, right? Now there's definitely democratic parts of America, and I'm not coming around saying America is not a democracy, but it was always a republic, right? And we got used to saying things like, or we got so used to believing that we were in this democracy. And it's a hard realization for people when they wake up and realize it's maybe not what they thought when they were kids. And as we've mentioned many times on this show, one of the distinct disadvantages, it's a disadvantage that America has, is the success of its nation over its history and the love most Americans have for it. I think in general, love for your country, your community is really important, right? I believe that. And but what we've seen in America is an extension of patriotism to all walks of life, and then mobilized so that you ignore all kinds of problems. right? All kinds of problems. So Bitcoiners are aware of this. I'm not teaching Bitcoiners to be suspicious of what the government thinks of itself or what it asks you to think of it, right? Bitcoiners sort of know the score, right? And have already made these assumptions. And there is plenty of democracy to salvage and save in America, right? It's inside of us and all those things. And we still have things down to the last possible refuge of people who believe in democracy, which, I would even say the Republicans and the Trumpers have forgotten about, right? They keep going on about the 2020 election. Like, there's nothing we can do, nothing anyone is even interested in doing. Democracy is about moving on from elections. It's about the peaceful transfer of power. If Trump would just say next election, right, 2024, he wouldn't have any trouble. I think he'd have a lot of people on board. But as it is, I see like Carrie Lake and all these other people that can easily topple him right now. I believe that. She had another one of her just amazing. So we've on this show, we've been following the Arizona elections quite a bit. And Carrie Lake, of course, the governor candidate, and she smashed one again yesterday out of the park where they were questioning her again about the 2020 election. And she just talks about making elections good going forward. So she's right on. And she reminded everyone, these journalists, I remember you questioning the 2016 election, right? Why is it okay for you? We didn't bug you when you did it. Just dynamite stuff. You got to see this woman, her talent level. I've yet to see a weakness. I've yet to see any crack in the armor. And what I see is way stronger, way stronger than Trump, right? And I thought Trump was the best I'd ever seen. I thought he was the best. Understanding his faults and mistakes, and you look at the problems he has, right? He can't shut his mouth. He'll say something that will harm himself, even when he's in a position where he should be quiet, right? He'll always just say something. But that's a good and bad situation, right? If you're living in a world where self-censorship is the most dangerous aspect of your culture, well, he's an appropriate president. But I think we're beyond that, right? I think we're beyond where we didn't know self-censorship was hurting us, and things have overtly moved into the true censorship realm in America. If you compare it to where we were back in 2015 when all of this started, right? When we were back in 2015 in the United States, we never thought the world that we are in today was even possible, right? We didn't even think that what would happen today, and how many of our democratic institutions have fallen, how many of the things that we thought were safeguards were never such in the first place. And we're going to get to a lot of stories today, but let's continue a bit through what's going on. We've got remember old Tedros, the head of the WHO, right? The head of the WHO. So the head of the WHO is now like what a lot of people predicted, right? Bitcoiners predicted it. Other folks predicted it, that he would start pivoting to the climate crisis. We've seen other people do that. But of course, he tweets yesterday, the climate crisis is a health crisis, right? But as we know on this show, there's no climate crisis. That's how we frame it. On this show, it's about mental health. It's about not getting tricked by the news. So here's the trick they always pull, right? And we talk about it a lot. Climate change. Is it real? Yeah. I think the scientists got that right? I think on just the number go up, number go down, the basic science, they got it right. I would say in general got it right. Now I'm discounting manipulated models. I'm discounting manipulated data sources, all of those things, right? I'm saying in general, they probably got the science of climate change, yes or no, correct, right? Second question, did we cause it? They say yes. A lot of people say no. Like when they go into the world of consensus around climate change, right? When everyone says there's a consensus around climate change, there's only a consensus around question A that I just said. Is it happening, yes or no? There's a consensus about that, right? I would say almost no scientists anymore would deny whether it's happening or not. To the degree to which it's happening, it's not nearly as big, right? If you go with the UNPC report, that UN report that everyone goes off of. It's the one that leads to all of the climate summits. It's the one that they've been renewing every couple of years, right? I think they're on edition number 8 or 9 or something like that. And it's the official document, right? It's the official document about predictions. It's the official document about causes, mostly written by bureaucrats. So, informed by scientists, but let's be honest about the document, mostly written by bureaucrats. But even in that document, they have now admitted in the latest version, right? So do humans cause it, right? So is it happening? Yeah. Do humans cause it? I'll give it to them. Yeah, sure. Why not? Right. But none of that matters because the third question is the only one that's important. What are the effects? There's absolutely no consensus on this, not even close. Not only is there no consensus on this, almost every model you'll find in the world is garbage. It's just garbage. They don't know how to factor in innovation. All these predictive models, right? Computers predicting the future, given inputs, right? They can do it. I'm not denying that it's possible to model mathematically the future, but how good is your model if you don't have any innovation? Do you think their models count the amount of nuclear reactors Bitcoiners are going to finance and build? No, of course not. Right? It's just like today, frozen. What happens in the future if nothing changes from today? Right? If every car is the same, all that stuff. They don't actually input innovation, and that's not even one part of their failure. Right? Another part of their failure would be from I think 2015 or 2016. I remember the numbers coming in, and it was with satellite recognition. We'd found out that there were about 1/3 more trees on Earth than we had previously estimated. 1/3, not a couple more trees. 30%, right? 30% more than we had. Now, all of these models that predict the future of weather on Earth all have one piece in it. How many trees are in the world? Because that sequesters CO2, right? It captures CO2 and takes it out of the atmosphere. So, of course, if you're going to factor the effects of CO2 emissions and its what it does in our ecosystem, what it does in our planet, you've got to talk about the effects that take away from it, the negative the negative impulses on it, and those would be forests, right? So when we found out in 2016 that all these trees were unaccounted for and that our old way of estimating was inaccurate and our new way of estimating with all these satellites was way better, right? Do you think they changed any of the models to say, well, these mitigating factors on the effects of climate change are actually not, they're different, and so the effects are different? No, of course not. They didn't change anything, right? They just kept going with the bad numbers, right? So climate change happening, yeah, like the science, I don't think they got that one wrong, right? I don't care because it doesn't matter once we get to question 3. But yeah, sure, I don't care. I'm not going to argue with a bunch of scientists saying we're in agreement, right? I think it's true, right? It's happening, right? Not as much. If you look in America, it's not happening at all, and America has the most accurate temperature readings in the world, right? Americans have, because of the nature of the weather here, how much it changes, how extreme the 4 seasons are in America. What's up, Dex? How extreme the 4 seasons are in America. We have a different obsession with the weather than a lot of places, right? Because it's so different all the time. We're always checking. All kinds of weather data has been available. We've had consistent weather data for over 100 years in America. And on continental America, anyway, we don't see any climate change. Now, we know that climate change is actually happening at the poles, and there's various reasons why that's dangerous, and we should be careful of it, right? But the catastrophic scenario is the following. It gets so warm that it never freezes on the poles, and therefore the currents that go from the Caribbean up to Europe and all the ocean currents would be affected. And then therefore the world would just freeze, because if that warm air isn't coming from the middle as a part of thermostatic control on Earth, going from the middle up to the top to cool down, creating condensation, creating weather patterns on Earth, all the things that keeps the world recognizable to us, right, would stop according to their catastrophic formulas, right? Warm air would go melt all the ice caps. It would never get cold enough. You know, at this point where the worst case scenario has us losing a couple of days, a couple of days below zero on the North Pole and the South Pole, days, right? Not weeks, days. And that, of course, is not catastrophic. So even in the UNP, whatever that stupid report is, even in that report, right? Even in that report, they admit that the costs, remember, this is a very important factor because the last report put this in it, that the cost of managing climate change is probably greater than the cost of just letting it happen. The cost in human life, the cost in GDP, right? Because it's going to cost money to control the environment in this way. Now, the good news is these are just nerds who don't know how to predict and are just sitting there saying their degrees are worth something and give them predictive abilities. They don't, right? People that are in the world of innovation, Bitcoiners, looking at what's getting built in the future, understand that our entire capacity to manage this stuff is about to change, right? It has nothing to do with a couple days of lost cold air in the North Pole and the South Pole, what it comes down to is we're going to be manipulating environments at a scale that no one has ever seen, right? We are going to be more like God when it comes to making Earth habitable for humans than we've ever been. I mean, look what we did in 50 years to Texas and deserts, right? We made them into very livable, beautiful places where before air conditioning, they weren't, right? You couldn't just go. The original people at Spindletop in Texas hated their lives. It was so hot, all the time hot. Texas in the south of the United States only really started to grow after World War II because we had the invention of air conditioning. And with the invention of the ASIC mining heater, with the invention of Bitcoin mining and the heat that necessarily is produced from the calculations, I think we have the beginnings of the opposite of air conditioning, of cold weather expansion. Cold weather expansion. We're going to be building domes. My whole story, Satoshi Winning Murders, a lot of it takes place above the Arctic Circle in a domed city. There's many of these domed cities at this time. There's other, it's not ASIC mining heating them all, of course. They've now tapped into magma flows and made in Canada where it's just rock, hard, cold, frozen over. They've made it more like Iceland that has the lava flows and rivers of lava, and there's a few other things that make it warm. But I predict a lot of this is going to happen, especially in the north. We haven't seen the north colonized to the extent that we can, and I think we're going to do it, right? I think that we have now the capacity to do that, and if we have portable, unlimited energy, I mean, that's the main problem about setting construction sites up there. I was a huge fan of that show Gold Rush Alaska for these reasons, and the reason I liked Gold Rush Alaska was just watching. So if anyone doesn't know, this was one of the most popular shows in America for a long time. I think it still is pretty popular, but I watched it like 10 years ago. All it is groups of miners. They follow, it's a reality show. They follow about 4 or 5 groups of gold miners, all in Alaska and mostly Yukon and Canada, because it's more fruitful for gold extraction up there. So what they do is they just start the cameras at the start of the season, right? They go and they're up there and they have X amount of vehicles. It's the same amount of teams. They have a wash plan, the thing you use to wash out all the material, right? You put material through a sluice, right? Which is with the water, and then gold is a different weight, so it gets captured in the sluice, and all the other stuff just gets tossed into an overburden pile and all that stuff. So it's a great show because you're watching these folks deal with problems in real time. You're watching them like what there's no mechanic you can call. They're way in the north, right? A machine breaks, they gotta fix it, right? It's just a constant problem solving situation and creative problem solving because your regular solutions aren't available to them, right? They're up there gathering gold. Each episode ends with a really neat like stage management device, which is they weigh the gold that they were able to process in that week. So you see them running the gold through the sluice, and then at the end they do the weigh, and everyone's around. How much did we make this week? It's just a great show, right? The payoff of measuring gold and how gutting it is for them when it's way less, even though they got through a lot of problems. How fun it is when it's way bigger than what they had thought, And you've got just really neat personalities. And anyway, it's a great show, right? But that's what started me on this idea. Watching these people in the north extracting gold and the troubles they went through made me think of what it was like to process oil in the heat a long time ago. Because these guys in the north are fighting the seasons, right? Once the snow starts, you can't run the sluice machine; it'll freeze. You can't process gold anymore in those conditions. You can't cut into the ground; it's too frozen, right? Your machines don't work anymore. It gets so frozen that the claws on the diggers on the excavators will break. Like, that's how bad it is, right? You see these huge pins broken in two, amazing stuff. So we're going to be colonizing the north, right? We're going to be doing that big time. So there is no climate crisis. Tedros, you bugger, go worry about other people who got COVID or something in a place where we're not interested. The Twitter layoffs happened yesterday, and all this fighting, oh, we're going to sue Elon. We're going to sue him. He can't do it, right? He can't fire these incompetents. And then, of course, Elon puts out 2 messages. You're fired. You're safe. I don't know if you saw. It was two, like, basically DMs, right? He just created two DMs. One, you're fired. One, you're safe. Now, in the context and the lead up to it, everyone's like, we're going to sue him. You can't just fire people with no warning. Da, 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 da. But in the note, he says 90 days. You're going to be paid for 90 days. So out until February, right? All your benefits and everything. So that just cut every single one of these law cases. He rug pulled them, right? Elon rug pulled the lawyer entrepreneurs yesterday that were ambulance chasing all of these fired employees. Because, you know, labor lawyers are some of the most devious people, right? And when you see these mass layoffs and all this stuff, you know, they're hearing cha-ching, cha-ching. They're like shitcoiners that are seeing, you know, a celebrity endorse their coin and getting all excited. It's the same thing, right? Whoa, what's going on here? So I'm glad that didn't work out for them. Now, the thing that is working, and Elon was complaining about it yesterday, was the advertising assault, right? It's come together pretty quickly. We laughed about Pfizer yesterday, but I think it's going to continue. I think it's not just going to be Pfizer. Mike Solana wrote that there would be this advertising assault, that it did come quickly than he anticipated, and he gave props to the authoritarians. This is the most successful media assault on a company he's ever seen, right? And I think that's true. I mean, but here's the thing. The coordinated nature of it, the decisive nature of it, is a bit of a peek behind the curtain, as far as I can tell, right? It's a bit of a peek behind the curtain. And you can see that, you know, every attack on Elon and Tesla is rolling over into, you know, it's getting copied, right? First of all, it's getting modeled and copied by others. But I think it's going into every one of his companies. And Mike Solana makes the prediction: the targeting of Elon will be profound. Aggrieved ex-employees will provide a source for stories, any number of them fabricated, that will capture our imagination for months to come. Distant relatives will be found and weaponized, with every detail of the man's life rooted out and turned against him. Then his companies will be targeted, not Twitter, but the companies that made him who he is today. Expect NASA to be interrogated on its work with SpaceX. Expect a push from Democrats specifically to advance the interests of older auto manufacturers at the expense of Tesla. Expect congressional hearings. Elon's enemies will be called to testify before Congress as experts. Every business interest he holds will be attacked. Every ounce of good he has garnered over the course of his career will be challenged. It's going to be hell. Well, that is a pretty good prediction. I think that's a pretty good prediction. I think a lot of it I can picture happening. I'm going to go a little different and say he's going to get through it quicker than we realize. You know what a psychological effect it's going to be when Twitter actually posts a profit because of the $8 scheme? That's going to be a wrecking ball. I think that's going to just go in there and start smashing things around. Because remember, he bought Twitter at a much smaller capacity than its competitors, right? Twitter is by far the least populated, the least used of the major social platforms. However, it's where all the journalists go. It's where all the, you know, higher IQ folks end up. And in general, right, it's a cesspool on Twitter, of course, but the news is basically just talking about what happened on Twitter. My show is basically just talking about what happened on Twitter. So is mainstream media news, right? Because that's where everyone's fighting. That's what I've always said about why it was so difficult for conservatives to clone Twitter and just go off on their own, because you're not actually there for the echo chamber, right? There are echo chambers within Twitter. Don't get me wrong, right? People are flying around their own thing, but they want to laugh at the person in the other echo chamber. They kind of want to take a shot and then tell their own gang, right? The game is two gangs, prank them, insult them, score a point for your team, and then run back to your side and say, look, I scored a point, right? That's basically what's going on. If you don't have the other team there, if you're just over on Truth Social saying, I did something, and you can't see it in a screenshot or whatever, the energy's not really there, right? It's like, okay, maybe you have a girlfriend in another town, maybe, right? Like maybe, but it seems kind of fishy. But so I say what Mike Solana predicts here for Elon is mostly true. However, I think he can avoid it through success. And remember, I think Bitcoiners have his back. I think the majority of Bitcoiners are going to come. I've often described as things go forward, right? D-Day. Remember D-Day, how decisive it was in World War II? Everyone running, rushing, right? Mobilizing, big plan. Somewhere in the near future, I see when the free peoples of Earth take control, right? And we rip down institutions for real in a type of D-Day scenario. I can imagine the Bitcoiners just knocking out fiat currencies on the trade floors, trade venues, just smashing, putting pressure, Soros style, on countries is a type of D-Day, right? And I think when Elon says, I can picture Canada or the EU or someone having a ton of attitude, really going overboard on their beliefs. That there was this one French parliamentarian who said, when Elon said the bird is free, and then she said, but the bird will be, I think she said, like, caged or noosed or tethered or connected or controlled. I think tethered, right? But the bird will be tethered to the EU rules, something along those lines, right? Maybe the case. I mean, I think these European folks could probably ban Twitter if they don't follow their rules. But what's that going to do to Europe, right? Like, this is not exactly the most competitive place going right now. And I continue to see Europeans come over to America, come to Canada. I think you're going to see a ton of them this winter with the energy costs. I think we're experiencing a whole new wave of European emigration, right, into other places. And who knows if they go back. I mean, Europe's great to go eat and drink and have a good time, but I don't think it's that great if you're a professional looking to build a life, right? It's got a lot of problems. And now, I mean, I love going there and I have a lot of friends there and all that stuff, but it's got a lot of issues. And, I see them being successful in the whole world of nomad culture and working and going to work there for a little bit and all that. But that, I think, ends up hurting their country because their folks can spend a few months there, go elsewhere where it's cheaper, go elsewhere where their money goes a lot further, and they don't have to deal with all these taxes and crazy people, right? Way too many university educated people in Europe that think they're so important and think they have the right to spend your money, right? It's infested. It's just absolutely infested. So what do we do over there? Who knows? So when you see this media ganging up on Elon, and then you see what's going on at the same time with Kyrie Irving and Kanye. I'll talk a bit about Kanye. So if you didn't know, I guess Kyrie Irving is a US basketball player, and he tweeted or retweeted. He got in trouble recently for retweeting an Alex Jones thing from years ago. And there was anti-Semitism in it, as I understand. It's very difficult to find the video now. Really not easy, right? It's been mostly scrubbed. And I looked. I could not find it. And I've been looking, right? It was supposedly on Amazon. I can't. So I don't know what was in the video, right? I don't know. Kyrie made a mistake, let's say, in perfecting his apology, right? Now, if ever it comes to me to apologize, I'm going to do what there's a few folks out there who did it. They go way overboard, right? Way overboard. I will never, ever stoop to this level again. So if you ever hear me write an excuse or an apology, right, and it sounds way overboard, right, well, it'll be by design, right? I prostrate myself at your feet and shall never commit such a sin ever again. I've heard a few people do this before. The guy who's I can't remember his name. He's a big reality TV producer in the United States, and I think he did Survivor or something. But he's a sort of like a Republicanish guy, and they made him do one of these apologies. And I read it, and it sounded so thick that it couldn't have been sincere, right? It was just like layers of being sorry for this little thing, right? So Kyrie, probably could have had fun with this and got out of it. But what happened was he came out and said, retweeted this thing. He came out and gave an apology, which was, I know I hurt people. I don't agree with everything in the video, fine, that's great. And then he just went into other oppressions, but he never actually said he was sorry, right? He just said, I'm sorry. He just said, I know I hurt people. Okay. So they didn't let him off, right? He probably could have got let off. He probably could have got away from all of this. But now he's getting attacked and suspended and is the main cause of conversation. Here's what axiomatic enemy of the state said. The corporate media won't shut up about Ye and Kyrie Irving. The same corporate media didn't give a shit who Epstein trafficked underage girls to. Anyone else find this suspicious AF, right? Now, let's talk about Kanye for a second, because there's some shocking stuff. Did anyone have a chance to read the note that Kanye's personal trainer sent him the other day, the text? Did anyone in the comments, did anyone see that? Did anyone have a chance to see the note that Kanye's... Now, here's the thing. I've never heard a human speak like this in my life to another human, right? I'll read it to you. So this is... And if you remember when Kanye first got into the trouble, he mentioned that Lizzo had the same trainer. This is him, right? Didn't see that? No. Okay. Listen to this, guys. So Kanye shared this, right? Or Ye shared this. This is from, his name is Harley. We're going to get into Harley in a second, right? I'm going to help you one of a couple ways. First, you and I sit down and have a loving, open conversation, but you don't use cuss words, and everything that is discussed is based in fact and not some crazy stuff that dumb friend of yours told you or you saw in a tweet. Now, it's important for the story that Harley is Jewish, right? It's important for the story because just before there was another text message I didn't show you that says, you must apologize to my people, right? So it's, you must apologize to my people. He's Jewish. That's the first part, right? Option one, I'm going to give you, first, you and I sit down, right? A couple of ways. First, you and I sit down. This is the part where I've never heard another human talk like this. You tell me if this is normal, right? Second option, I have you institutionalized again, where they medicate the crap out of you, and you go back to Zombieland forever. Play date with the kids just won't be the same. Have you ever heard anything like that? You ever heard people talk like that in your life? I haven't. I know some people like this. I've never heard anyone talk to another person like that. And Kanye comes out and says, right in the text, like, have you ever heard a trainer talk to a billionaire black man this way? I know a couple billionaires. Let me tell you something. Their trainers don't fucking talk to them this way, ever. No one talks to them this way. It's not possible. It's impossible for the billionaires that I know to be spoken to this way, under any circumstances, under any conditions. It would never happen. A direct threat to children. Now remember, he also says again, right? I'll have you institutionalized again. Well, who is Harley? Who is Harley? Well, I found out. This is all from Restore Order USA, who did some investigations, but I've looked into them as well because it turns out he's Canadian. Who is Harley Pasternak, the man whom Kanye West has accused of trying to institutionalize him, drug him into oblivion, and take his kids away? As it turns out, the personal trainer is connected to PSYOPs in the Canadian military. Another strangeness. So what is it he did, right? So let's take a look at his background. At first glance, nothing stands out. He's just an educated man with a master's degree in exercise and nutrition science, and that isn't the whole story. His Wikipedia page states that during his time at the University of Toronto, right here, Pasternak served as a nutrition and exercise scientist at Department of National Defense's Civil Institute for Environmental Medicine. The Canadian, the DND is the Canadian government's that supports the armed forces. It's, yeah, I don't really know the comparison to the United States. But anyway, also, worth noting is that he was also with Kanye when he was hospitalized in 2016 at the onset of his original breakdown. When it happened, he was actually at Harley Pasternak's home. So this is from the newspaper at the time, said that, it actually quotes being at Harley Pasternak's home that time. And here's another part. Finding information on Harley has become complicated by recent events. For some odd reason, his Wikipedia page was altered after Kanye's tweet. They removed all reference to those people that he worked with and things like that. What I want to do is underline, the Department of Defense supports the Canadian Armed Forces. It's a civilization or a civilian organization, a support system of sorts for the military. I'm not sure what the equivalent, this is what he's saying, with DOD, Department of Homeland Security. Regardless, Harley Pasternak worked as a scientist for 2 years in Toronto, one of Canadian, with the defense research thing. What sort of stuff do they actually do there, right? So here's the list of stuff they do at that Canadian institute, right? It's human systems integration, social and psychological factors that affect resolution of conflict, right? It's literal psyops, right? And then he actually goes and finds an interview with this Harley guy, right? So don't even worry about what the website says. This is Harley Pasternak in an interview talking about his past because he's a minor celebrity and probably couldn't resist, right? This is what he says. Working for the military, I wasn't governed by the same laws that a typical person was. So I could look at the impact of certain drugs that are not everyday things. That's one of his quotes, right? And basically just goes on and says that he's been doing this kind of stuff for a while. It's not just him. There are others, right? And now this comes down to that whole MK Ultra. You know what MK Ultra was? Right? MK Ultra, a lot of people know about it. It was the same idea, the experiments with LSD, with certain drugs, with using celebrities in 1960s culture in the United States in order to propagate certain public policy initiatives, let's say, right? Do you know that the Gulf of Tonkin, which was the false flag that set up the Vietnam War, right? Vietnam War, objectively speaking, not a conspiracy. None of those things was started by a false flag. The Americans said this thing happened. It didn't. It was the excuse to send more arms in. Well, do you know the admiral of the ship that was in the false flag operation was actually Jim Morrison's dad? Jim Morrison from The Doors, that was his dad. And that a lot of these folks lived around in a neighborhood in LA where they had a movie studio that produced all kinds of movies that were influential. Not Hollywood movies, but just videos, commercials, stuff like that. The band The Mamas and the Papas, Janis Joplin, the Beach Boys, several others all lived in that neighborhood and all had ties to this institution. So we don't know what came of it, right? A lot of people don't know what came of it, but the whole Marilyn Manson thing was somehow around it. I don't know exactly how. A lot of stories, a lot of rumors, but the parts that are true is it existed, drugs involved, Hollywood operations involved, movies produced. That's all real, right? Who exactly, what they were doing, Jim Morrison, I don't know any of that, right? Just mentioning connections. So what we have is sort of confirmation that that elites literally do send handlers to celebrities, right? Particularly those deemed unpredictable or hard to control, with the purpose of keeping those celebrities in line. Those handlers would look a lot like Pasternak, right? And it isn't too crazy when you think about it. A guy with military psyop training and exercise science finds work in Hollywood. Set him up with stars under the guise of fitness instruction, have him keep an eye on them. This doesn't mean he's a secret CIA agent or something, but it does mean that he's serving powerful interests, at the very least has their backing. Even if the personal trainer lacks the ability to get someone institutionalized on a whim, Pasternak is likely an intermediary for more powerful and shadowy forces in Hollywood. Does that sound like it makes sense? I mean, to me, it does, right? To me, I think that's what we're dealing with here. So what is Kanye's redemption arc here, right? What is his redemption arc? Well, if all of these governments have been using these folks for a long time and manipulating public perceptions and all that stuff, and the veil is about to break, right? The veil is about to break. It's going to be more chaos, just more chaos, right? More of it, right? More people not coming together, because all of this will just continue to be used as a weapon and a bludgeon to further divide people. That's what it looks like to me. I don't think any revelations that MK Ultra is real and that Kanye has handlers and all that is going to persuade people necessarily, right? Not even close. But here's the Bitcoin angle, right? Here's why MK Ultra and Bitcoin are tied, right? All of this stuff that came from MK Ultra and these psyops that were about division, keeping people apart, and therefore propagating a system, relied on misinformation, disinformation, confusion, fog of war, all of those things, right? Now, all of that is only possible if your money is as polluted and defective as the money that we currently use, right? Because everything about our money involves, and our system involves, using these institutions. Like we don't really have such a thing as money. We've got aircraft carriers, and we've got a propaganda machine, and we've got this reference to fake data and GDP and energy input and output and its relative balance around the world from one country to the other, and none of it makes sense. You know, again, you need a 130, 140 IQ just to talk about it. Forget about understand about it, right? And just to talk about it, you got to be in the 130, 140 range to have the capacity to even keep track of the players, right? So here's the thing. It's going to keep fighting because this money just is oriented to make people fight, right? There's nothing it can do other than that. It only exists if there's conflict, right? It only exists if there's three parties, them, the two others in the middle. And these piece in the middle can be anything, banks, Hollywood, as we talked about yesterday, right? These are all these third-party things. We talked about art passing through the Hollywood studios and what that does to P2P sales of art, right? We still know that art and literature and culture sell better P2P, right? They sell better word to mouth than they do with the marketing machine. So here's what's going on. If Kanye does have a redemption arc here, right? If he does have a redemption arc, and I think he does. I think he does. I think that we're starting to see, you know, he's got his own mental problems for sure, right? But we can forgive those and love people even if they have psychological problems. Everybody does. It's not a problem, right? I think we got to get over that there are, you know, this idea that there are people without any problems altogether, right? My theory is the more you get to know about someone, the more you realize they have the same problems as you. It doesn't matter who they are. Anytime I see someone, a person, a company, an institution, you say, oh, it's perfect, you know? Look at Apple. What would it be like to go inside of Apple right now, right? You know what they're saying? It looked, I mean, they got $2 trillion valuation, $3 trillion valuation, the most valuable company in the history of the world. So many talented people, they sell products like it's nobody's business, can't stop, amazing, right? You know what they probably talk about at the top? You know, we haven't done anything since Steve Jobs was around. We haven't had one good new product. Oh, China, why are we so stuck with them, right? Why can't we decouple like other companies? I'm not for, you know, it's probably confusion. It's probably as fucked up as any other company on the inside, right? Every company is a bit screwed up, right? That's just the nature of people coming together. If you put 5 people in a room, there's going to be one person no one likes. That's just what happens, right? Any company, doesn't matter which one. And Apple's probably no different. So you can tell, you know, I believe that the more you get to know someone, the more you realize their problems are, you know, maybe they manage them better, but we've all kind of got the same self-doubts, and we've got the same bad days, and we've got all that stuff, right? So, so that all that will just continue to be exploited if we are allowing for these, you know, third-party interests in everything we do, right? And that comes from the banking sector, because we did our best to invent money, but Satoshi, along with us, right? Because you can't do it alone, right? You can't make a phone call to yourself. You can't use a network with yourself, right? The network becomes real when people use it, and people came and used Bitcoin. So I always say that, you know, it's got a good shock value to it, but it's worth saying to people that no, we invented money. It didn't, whatever you thought was money, you know, but Bitcoiners taking the high ground to say that we actually invented money, which is true. You could make the case, right? We actually invented money. We invented it. There was things before that were used as it, but they were all facsimiles. They were not money, right? the thing we did with Bitcoin is money, because again, you can count it, right? We talked about the psychological individuation, the Jungian process of encounter is the first thing. You have to encounter your shadow, right? We can't encounter anything if we can't count, right? We can't encounter any problems in modern Western civilization if we don't know how to count, if we don't know who's making money off this, if we don't know who's paying Pasternak, if we don't know how rich this guy is, there's a big problem. Now, I'm not saying I want investigations about who's rich and who isn't rich, but having a public ledger, watching money flow between people, watching all this stuff gives us a real opportunity, right? Justin says, I won't personally take credit for creating money, but I will take credit for being intellectually honest and choosing honest money. Yeah, look, I'm not saying you have to go out and take credit for it, right? What I'm saying is the early community, through using it, through believing in it, and through stretching themselves, made it real, right? Now, 100% Satoshi invented it. I'm not trying to leech off of Satoshi's invention as like, but it's the whole I am Satoshi thing, right? We are Satoshi. And because we did it, because, you know, it's like, I like this image, you know, like of the early Bitcoin thing. And it was true. It was actually true. Here's the image. You know, someone said, you know, we got to fix the whole system. None of it's going to work, right? And it's as if we all went, okay, yeah, I'm free weekends, you know, I'm free weekends, you know, let's do it. Like we can change money. I'm free weekends. And we can't downplay how important that was, right? That the early folks who literally took their weekends to build this thing, right? To follow it, to love it, to care for it. That's what made it a thing, right? We can all agree on the amazing innovation, the clairvoyance, the breakthrough, the figure for all time that Satoshi is. But people had to believe, right? And if they didn't believe, you couldn't really tell that money, even though we invented it, is still a psychological construct, right? And that's why we make our show all about psychological engines, right? It's just about the psychological engine of Bitcoin, its ability to propagate the future, contrasted with the psychological engine of dollars, which are running out of steam, right? Literally running out of steam. Justin says, yeah, that's exactly my point, Justin. It's Satoshi's invention wouldn't have persisted without people believing. That's exactly what I mean. It's the people believing and taking this plunge that we can believe and act as if this is the best money that was ever created, because the more we look at it, the more we say it is, and it solves this problem, it solves that problem. It's money, right? You know, it's the same feeling. Finding Bitcoin is the same feeling as finding a pot of gold. It's literally the same feeling, right? Because you found money. Now, all that takes for you to find Bitcoin and find the gold, the pot of gold that is Bitcoin, is that shift in mindset to understand that what it is you're looking at is what you're looking at. That's why there's 1,000 million stories that you hear from people all the time. Oh, I heard about it in 2012 and I didn't do anything. You know, I heard about it in 2013. I didn't buy. My friend told me about it in this year. I didn't buy. We all have it. I have the story. Everyone has the story, right? About when he didn't buy. It's because, you know, you looked at a pot of gold and walked past it. You whistled past a pot of gold, right? No matter what year, time, value, whatever it was, you didn't recognize it for what it was. And everyone, you know, sometimes it doesn't shine the same way gold does. And gold is not as shiny as people think, right? Watch Gold Rush Alaska. You'll see when they get it in nature, you would never know it's gold, right? It's pretty funny. All right, team. That's all I got for this morning. No bored weekends, you know. No, I slept in today. Do you know I slept into like 7 o'clock today? Today's show was produced on the minimal viable amount of time. I think. I don't know if I could get away with producing a show in a shorter amount of time. In bed at 7, so pretty good, pretty good. I never sleep in like that. Normally it's out. You know, it was my daughter's birthday yesterday, so we had Shabbat dinner and all those kinds of things. You know, it was great. Awesome, guys. See you tomorrow. And don't forget the political show Tuesday night, Bitcoin Magazine. We're going to be using my illusion again. Remember, Bitcoiners have the moral high ground, right? We're above the two parties. So as everything's happening politically, we're going to take the Bitcoin moral high ground, but we're going to piss from the high ground our yellow pea into the red tide and we're going to talk about the red wave. We're going to talk about the orange tide, right? So there you go. Join us Tuesday night show. All right, team. Have a great day.